Today on the show, we're talking all about problems and solutions. Don't go anywhere because Real Estate Gold starts now. Welcome to Real Estate Gold, the show where we discuss all things real estate. I'm your host, John Sane, and I'm here with Micah McCray, the principal broker of the McCray Real Estate Group.
Good morning.
So today on the show, we're talking all about problems and solutions. And I guess can I kick this off? The way to be a successful real estate agent is that first you've got to be able to identify problems that you come across. But the problem is that's only half the battle. So, I mean, most people can easily identify, issues that you come across, but it's how creative are you at coming up and finding solutions to those problems. So, what are some of the main problems that we kind of come across in real estate?
So, okay, let's start with probably the most common one that people would recognize would be financing. Those could be anything from the type of lenders that you use to the type of properties that you're trying to purchase or sell for that matter. Whenever you're looking at different kinds of properties, everybody thinks of just a normal single family residence, just a regular home sitting by itself on a lot. But you've also got mixed use properties. So you're going to have, for example, a house that's single family residence but may have a small business that's run out of it, for example. Well, that may cause problems for some lenders, but maybe not others. You may have one that's a single family residence, but it's got other homes on the property that the owner rents out or that you're wanting to rent out as a buyer, which also brings into another set of basically conditions that lenders would want to know about. You can run into poor credit, which is a big one that a lot of people know about. And it's not always that it's bad in the sense that you can't get the loan, but it may be bad in the sense of the type of loan you want. Maybe they have more of a stringent requirement than another type of loan, which may cost you more in points, for example, or interest, but maybe it would still work for you. But that's still a problem that does exist within the framework of financing and what could cause problems, those kind of things. Of course, we've got our appraisals. Appraisals are a big thing, where an appraisal is nothing more than a report that takes into consideration of what the market is currently doing, what is sold, and based on that past history, they give their recommendation of what the value would be so that the bank can feel comfortable in loaning that money against that property, knowing that if something ever happened and the bank had to sell it, that they would be covered, is basically what that comes down to.
And since we're kind of on the topic of financing, one thing that is really important for us on the real estate side is to get that pre-approval.
Yep.
Because the pre-approval is important to us because not only does it kind of tell us what kind of price range we've got to play with, but it also tells us what type of loan you've been qualified for.
Yeah.
Because depending on the type of loan, kind of rules out certain properties. For example, if you're, doing a USDA loan, that's going to rule out some of your fixer-up properties.
Yes, and even in some locations.
Yeah.
There's some locations that the USDA won't even loan in just because it's outside of their economic, I'm going to say district of what they're lending in.
Also, if you're interested in purchasing a mobile home, certain loans are not going to qualify for those mobile homes.
Right.
So I guess the next step after the financing and the appraisal would be the inspection.
Yep.
And that's where, honestly, that's probably where we find most of the problems that we.
Yeah. So
kind of take us through the inspection.
So when we go through, once we get a contract accepted by everybody, usually there's an inspection period. And then what happens is once that inspector goes out to the property, whatever it may be, they're out there trying to tear this thing apart and figure out all the worst case scenarios of all these little problems, and they're going to nitpick it. You know, a home inspector is there to tell you what is wrong with the property, what could cause problems, what is, you know, what is something you need to worry about, what is something you don't need to worry about, what is something that was normal for the era that house was built, or something that was not normal for that house, for that era, for that when that house was built. So the whole purpose of the inspector is supposed to give you every little detail that could possibly be wrong with that property or problems that you may need to think about in the future. They're not there to tell you that this house is not worth buying. That's not their job. Their job is to say, hey, these are all the little problems that you have. These are what you need to be aware of. And it's your job and your agent's job to help you navigate through that report and say, hey, here's the things that you need to ask for. Here's the things you don't need to ask for. There is no such thing as a house that passes inspection. Not a single one. I've never heard of one, never met an agent that's had one. And I've been doing this since 2005. You know, it's an impossibility. You cannot have a perfect house. I find new constructions that would fail home inspections. It's just part of it. That's what they do. There is no pass or fail when it comes to a home inspection. And that is the biggest thing that people will come out and say, well, it failed my home inspection, or it failed the home inspection. No such thing. Now, if it failed a new construction inspection, as far as like from the state or the city or the county, depending on where you're building or whatever, that's a completely different story. Then you can't even inhabit it. But if it passes that, you know, you can have a home inspection right after it, and it quote unquote would fail it, you know, instantly. Even literally come in the next day, and it would still fail it.
And, you know, from the buyer standpoint, I would highly recommend that you listen to your real estate agent when they kind of suggest home inspectors, because you want to have a good home inspector that provides a quality report.
Yeah.
Because, you know, one of them that, you know, we try to use the most, you know, his report, I really like how he breaks it down, because, you know, he's kind of color codes it to, you know, red, yellow, and green. So, you know, red is, you know, critical things that you need to look at
and realize that it's going to be
so
a problem.
These are kind of major issues that you should consider. And the yellow is, you know, some of the things that you probably want to consider getting fixed, but they're not, you know, necessarily detrimental. It could be based on the type of loan it is, and that kind of goes back to the appraisal.
Yeah,
because they have their own inspection.
Yeah, depending on whether it's government or a government-backed loan, they will come in with their own basis of things that each property needs to meet. And if it doesn't meet those, then they're going to put conditions in their appraisal report that those things need to be met or repaired or fixed or remedied or whatever, to move forward with the appraisal, which would allow the financing to go through. Because if those things aren't repaired or remedied or whatever, then, you know, you can't move forward with it, and the bank won't finance it until it's done. And in some cases, that can be handled by the seller. And then in certain government-backed loans, it cannot be handled by the seller. It has to be handled by the buyer.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
And then in the green section of that report, you know, those are things that are like more not future things to consider, you know, like a lot of times you'll find the roof on that, you know, if it's kind of, you know, in the next 5 years or next 10 years, you know, you need to kind of consider.
Be aware that these things could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, some of the main things that you want to consider in the home inspection are your major issues. So
I would say like safety,
electrical,
plumbing,
roof,
foundation, any of those.
We have run into issues with foundation. And of course, we'll talk into some of the solutions to some of these problems a little later. But
a minor safety would be another one.
You know, and depending on, because you mentioned the government loans, you know, railing on steps, you know, if it's, you know, 3 or more steps, you know, it has to have a handrail.
GFCI outlets near water sources.
Smoke detectors.
Yeah.
Those types of things. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this, and we'll talk about some of the solutions to these problems.
In Tennessee, the seasons come and go. But our season never ends. To be the best, it takes an entire team working together for a common goal. The McRae Real Estate Group has a mission of changing the real estate industry. We value our clients and believe in serving with humble integrity. We are data-driven and use science to influence our decision-making. Northeast Tennessee is our home, and home starts with us.
And we are back. So today on the show, we're talking all about problems and solutions. We just kind of laid out some of the most common problems we run into in real estate. So let's kind of switch gears and talk about the other side of that coin, and let's discuss some of the solutions to those problems. So first, we talked about financing. So what are
Yes.
some of the solutions for financing?
Well, some of them are going to be very basic. For example, like we have working relationships with lenders. You know, we have different lenders that do different kinds of types of lending that work with different kinds of properties. You're going to have a ton of different resources as far as that goes that you would need, depending on what kind of property you're looking at, whether it's a new construction, whether it's a rehab property, whether it's a mobile home, as you mentioned earlier, which that could be single wide or double wide or triple wide. True modular homes, for example, stick built homes, you know, commercial property, raw land, investment property, you know, multifamily, any of that kind of stuff. So all of these different kinds of lenders we have access to. We have these people that we work with that know that when they say they can do something, they can do it. You know, they're not going to end up saying, yes, we can do this. We're going to write you a pre-approval, you know, et cetera. And then you're going to get through halfway through the contract and find out that, you know, oh, well, they can't actually do it, you know, for whatever reason. This is why we do work with certain lenders, and we do have ones that we do add as we find them that maybe are specific to a certain type of property that maybe our current ones don't do. For example, there's always these weird situations that can pose problems that we have to find solutions for. Well, we have so many lenders and so many people that we work with on a daily basis that we can actually reach out to them directly, knowing that they can't actually work on this type of property. They may actually have a solution as well. So when you work with a good realtor, or you have a great realtor, or even a team of agents, or an office that has a great team of agents on it, you're going to have that resource of, even if your agent doesn't specifically have it, you know, they're going to have every agent's resources in their office, you know, hopefully to help fix these problems. Another one is specifically, like we were talking about, some lenders have products to help finance difficult properties. Well, one that we just sold was a property that was stopped halfway through construction, you know, and it took a specific lender that was willing to go out and look past the fact that it was started and stopped and been sitting there for a little while, that it was ready to go. They were good with it. They had to get some special conditions met, but it worked. And that agent that brought that lender knew exactly what she was doing. It was a great lender. She worked at a bank out of Virginia, in our case, because we're in Tennessee, but she was licensed in both states. Did a great job working on her side of it. And the agent was great to work with. And everybody, because they had their ducks in a row, they had people to get out there and do the work and were willing to get out there and do the work. It made the transition almost seamless. You know, it was a great job. But that was because of the lenders and the inspectors, for example, all those different things that we had going on. And a lot of them were brought by the buyer's agent, but she had a great team working behind her. So that's what made that deal work, is because she had solutions already in place by the right team members. So
Now, another issue that we do come across is poor credit.
yep.
So, what are some of the options that, if somebody has poor credit, what are some of the options for those people?
So, for example, one of our lenders has a program that he can actually put your report into and can almost give you an idea or a snapshot that if you do these basic little things, that within 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever, that it will raise your credit score to X, to whatever that minimum is, or whatever that score is that you're looking to try to hit, right? But there's also more in-depth solutions that you may want to go to. Well, that could be credit repair. That could be having somebody go in, look at your report, and fix all these things that are incorrect or basically that aren't supposed to even be there. Because there's a lot of times where you'll find stuff that aren't even supposed to be on your report that have nothing to do with you. Somehow they got on your report. And if you don't constantly pay attention to those things, you won't catch it. You may find it 3 years later. Well, it may be killing your score by 20, 30 points, And sometimes it takes a special group of people to constantly work on that, send those letters, and get those things repaired. Yes, these are things you could do on your own, but you do have time is of the essence, so to speak, because the laws are worked on based off of time and response time and et cetera. So if you get caught up and screw up, then you could mess it up and not be able to get it fixed correctly. So credit repair companies are sometimes a good resource.
And something else to kind of keep in mind is that just like in real estate, the lending side of things is constantly changing and evolving as well.
Yep.
So it's, we do a really good job of keeping up with what the real estate market is doing, but I don't really do so well at keeping up with what lending is doing. I just kind of rely on the lenders to kind of guide my client.
It's a team effort.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Like if we were good at doing every little thing, then I would have a mortgage license, and I don't. And there's a reason, because it's a lot to keep up with.
Something else to consider is that, the products and services that lenders have access to is constantly changing as well. So, they find ways to get people money for purchasing properties that they need. So the next step is the appraisal. And so we kind of mentioned some of the issues with the appraisal. One of the main concerns that people always have is what happens, especially in today's market, what happens if the appraisal comes back undervalued than what the purchase offer was?
That's typically the only problem that you will ever have with an appraisal, maybe besides timeline getting them out there, which we can also go over. But, when you're looking at something that comes under appraised, for example, we did have one that closed not too long ago. It was a property that came in. We had it under contract for about $850, and I'm going to just sort of go over basic numbers. It came in $200,000 under, basically because it could be zoned as commercial, but it was technically still zoned residential. It could easily have been switched over. However, it was going to take some legwork. Part of the process had been started, but it wasn't finished, so it wasn't fully capable of being commercial, or at least it hadn't been approved and all that stuff to move forward with commercial, all the way to fruition. So basically, the appraisal came back because they could only pull comps up to 650, I think it was. I think it was 650. I can't remember. Anyway, so it came under quite a bit, right? And so what happened was the solution ended up being that the buyer would bring basically half of the difference of contract price to close price, or to appraisal price. So he ended up bringing about $100,000 to the closing table. It was a great deal for him because it met a lot of needs that he wanted. It was something that he wanted for his family, and he thought it was worth the $850. Otherwise, he wouldn't have wrote the contract for it. But it was a unique property in a multifaceted, set of circumstances. It was different. It wasn't something you could just go find 100 properties just like it and appraise it, right? So it caused a problem for the appraisal. But the ultimate solution was, which the buyer and seller both had to agree on, was that if the seller brought 100K to it, for example, to the table, that would be, and then receive financing for the other 650. So that's basically what happened. That's how it worked out. Now, is that all the time going to happen? No, because not everybody has 100 grand laying in their bank account to go spend. But there are other solutions. You can also send it back to the appraiser and say, look, we need to have this redone. We don't think this is correct. And we attempted that. Didn't work out too well because the appraisal just basically disagreed with it. But that's another route you can go. Sometimes they'll do that. Sometimes they won't. But that's probably two of your best ways to have it appraised, or, to deal with the issue coming under appraised. You can also just sell it at whatever the appraisal price is. That's another solution. Is it always the best one? No. Especially if it comes in way under appraised. So there are a lot of issues that come up with the appraisal coming under, for example, because the bank will not finance it if it's being financed as under appraised. If it's appraised at $600,000, that's all the bank's going to lend on. So, you're going to have to deal with that problem. And our way is either have it reappraised, have a different appraisal come out, which will delay your closings, or have a seller bring cash to the table, buyer bring cash to the table to make up the difference.
And then the last category is the inspection period, or the home inspection. And that tends to be the one where we kind of have to think outside of the box a little bit more.
Yeah.
And, kind of get creative on finding solutions for some of the home inspection. So, if a buyer comes up and asks for certain things to be fixed, what are some options to kind of handle that problem?
So you can have where the seller actually does the repairs that the buyer wants or is requesting. You can give them money in lieu of repairs, which basically means, hey, I'm going to give you $5,000 to fix it yourself. It could go sit in escrow depending on what kind of loan they're getting. Seller can put it in escrow for them to do. They can lower the purchase price by that amount, in lieu of repairs. They can obviously just not fix them altogether, which is not necessarily a good solution all the time. But there's several things that they can do. They can have them repaired. Buyer can repair them. They can give buyer money, whether it's in escrow or off the purchase price, to repair them on their own. Or they can go back and forth between the items as well. It doesn't have to be, yes, I have to accept this, or I have to give you money based off these numbers. It's basically they can say, we've got X amount of things. We're willing to give you money for this, or we're willing to repair this, but not these items, and just in case the buyer comes across as nitpicky, for example.
Yeah, because, one of the issues we do run across is that, I'm not going to really call anybody out or anything like that, but, it's sometimes we get requests to fix things that just really aren't that important.
Yeah, like
if
paint color.
Somebody wants to come in and says, well, I don't like the color of the walls, I want the seller to paint it. Well, who's going to actually do that?
Yeah.
Keep in mind that the inspection is really for the major things. We sold a property once that, had foundation issues. So, the walls were kind of cracked. But the thing to keep in mind is that there are very, very, very few things that can happen to a property that cannot be fixed.
Yeah.
Because,
everything can be fixed.
Yeah. One of the biggest concerns most buyers that we come across have is, mainly the roof and the foundation. And if, they see cracks in the foundation, that instantly turns a buyer off. But keep in mind, there's solutions to those issues. There's
And sometimes
foundation repair has come a long, long way. So, there's all kinds of options to fix and repair foundations.
Yeah, we had a client one time, this is a different property, but when they bought their house, they bought it from a guy that was doing construction on it. Well, what they did was they were worried. They had an engineer come out and look at it, and they were worried about the way that it was built up front. So they wanted to, not that it was going to be an issue or anything, but they just wanted to keep it from ever having a problem. So they basically drilled holes in every single section of their wall that had dirt behind it. and basically pumped it with concrete. So they solidified all these concrete blocks, I think they put rebar in it. I can't remember what he said, but they basically concreted every single wall that was touching dirt. And because of that, it reinforced the walls. Did they need to do it? Probably not. But a lot of people saw those holes and they were like, well, what's wrong with the wall? Well, it wasn't really that there was anything wrong with it. In fact, it would have been perfectly fine if they had left it alone, most likely. So, but they wanted it extra done. Well, the problem was that it was a perceived problem. It wasn't a real problem. It was perceived. Half the people that came in and looked at it were like, hey, why are all these holes here? Is there a foundation problem? No, there's not. And there's especially not now because they basically filled it with concrete. But the issue was that when we would explain something, then we had no issues and people understood it. Whether they were willing to make a move on it's a different story, but they understood why it was done. Now, a lot of times, agents would show that property. We didn't necessarily always get updated on it, and if they had questions at the beginning, we weren't being forthcoming and saying, hey, this is an issue, because we didn't know it was a problem yet, because we could see the concrete, and we assumed that everybody else would look at it and see the concrete. But agents weren't explaining that. They were either just leaving it alone, not explaining it, or maybe fearful up front and saying, hey, there must have been a basement problem because they filled it with concrete, whether it actually had one or not. And because they didn't present the solution before they ever had a problem, it ran into more problems. And we tried to do that. Once we figured out what was happening, we started explaining this to the agents up front so that they could hopefully reiterate that same information and pass it along to their clients. So hopefully that would never be a problem up front. So that was how we also came up with a solution to fix their solution.
So let's go ahead and take a quick look at the market report. So the first one we're going to take a look at is the absorption rate. So the absorption rate for August was 1.78 months. So it's slowly starting to kind of trickle its way back up to kind of normal. The next one is days on market. And the average days on market for August was 16 days. And I guess the only kind of real solution I can come up with that one is that it was a lot of cash deals. So
yeah,
because cash deals, I mean, they can close in 2 weeks, and since that's right at the 2-week mark, I assume that was a lot of cash deals in August.
Well, you're probably catching a lot of people from out of state that haven't fully hit school yet, that they were rushing to get maybe their properties sold wherever they were coming from, which they had cash maybe in those properties.
Yeah.
And then they could come down here and make an offer and be in and out as quick as possible. That's probably the only logical explanation for that.
A lot of simultaneous closing. So
yeah,
they close on their property and then they close on the ones that they're purchasing same time. So the next one is the list to sell ratio, and that is currently sitting at 97.1%. So that's also kind of come down a little bit, and that's about where kind of normal.
Yeah,
pre-COVID.
That's about what, 2 points down from last month.
Yeah, and then the last one is our average sales price in August, which has really shot up quite a bit, and it is sitting at $360,000. So that does our market report, and that will also do our show for today. So we go live usually every first Monday of each month, but because of the holiday this month, we kind of had to do it today. But
yep.
So hope you guys enjoyed the show today, and you'll tune in next month.
Oh, and if you also have any questions, just because we forgot to mention this earlier, please feel free to reach out. You can either send us messages, make comments, whatever you'd like to do, however you want to reach out to us. If you'd like to see topics or problems maybe that you don't even know a solution to, feel free to reach out to us.
Anything you want us to kind of cover, drop us a line, and we'll try to base a show around that. So
yeah,
please feel free to send us a message. So
have a nice week, everybody.
That'll do us today. So catch you guys next time.